Where do we even begin after everything that unfolded at Watkins Glen? Because in all honesty, this feels like one of those specific NASCAR weekends where the actual racing on the track took a backseat to the intense drama brewing beneath the surface. The wildest part is that we actually have two massive storylines to dive into today that currently have fans all across the garage locked in heavy debates. The first situation centers around a veteran superstar who genuinely appeared to be hitting his absolute breaking point, both physically and emotionally, while out there competing. And honestly, the words captured over his team radio caught a massive amount of people completely off guard. As for our second story, that one has left the fanbase absolutely enraged at NASCAR officials following the emergence of new footage showcasing a brutal crash that somehow managed not to trigger a caution flag. Seriously, once people caught a glimpse of the onboard perspective that Fox barely even utilized during the live broadcast, the internet community completely went into meltdown mode. What makes these two situations feel so deeply intertwined is how they both throw a spotlight on a topic that fans have been discussing with increasing frequency lately. The immense pressure, the rising frustration, the sheer intensity, and truthfully, the absolute chaos that is surrounding NASCAR right now as we push further into the current season. There is a palpable tension inside the garage. Drivers are completely running out of patience. Fans are heavily critiquing official decisions. And following the events of Watkins Glen, it truly feels like tempers and emotions are beginning to overflow everywhere. So, we have an incredible amount of details to analyze today. But before we dive straight into it, if you appreciate genuine NASCAR discussions like this one and want to get daily updates from fans who truly live and breathe this sport week in and week out, make sure you slam that like button and subscribe to NASCAR Nation Report. This channel is still in its early stages. We are actively driving toward our milestone of 15,000 subscribers. And honestly, it would be incredible to have you jump on board early and become a part of this growing community from the very start. Now that opening major story absolutely has to focus on Kyle Busch, because despite the fact that he finally secured one of his most impressive performances of the entire season at Watkins Glen, the post-race chatter did not really revolve around his actual finishing position. Instead, everyone was talking about what the audience managed to overhear on his radio, and what that might indicate about the mental and physical state Kyle Busch finds himself in at the moment. During the concluding stage of the Go Bowling at Watkins Glen event, Busch suddenly keyed up his mic and requested his Richard Childress Racing crew to track down Dr. William Heisel immediately after the checkered flag dropped. The specific tone of his voice instantly sparked immense worry among listeners because there was absolutely no hint of humor in his delivery. He sounded incredibly subdued, deadly serious, thoroughly exhausted, and truthfully, just completely spent. He instructed his crew, "Can somebody try to find Will Heisel? He's the kindred doctor guy. Tell him I need him after the race, please." NBC reporter Dustin Long subsequently verified that radio transmission, pointing out that Dr. William Heisel has spent a significant number of years working closely alongside NASCAR organizations, competitors, and pit crew personnel. Initially, nobody had a clear understanding of what was actually happening, and since we are dealing with Kyle Busch here, fans immediately started speculating that a far more severe physical issue was unfolding. However, FS1 later cleared up the confusion by explaining that Busch had actually been battling a pretty brutal sinus sickness throughout the entire weekend and required a shot immediately following the race because he was feeling absolutely miserable physically while driving. And honestly, when you think about how hard that Watkins Glen race was, it actually makes his performance even more impressive. Music, Kyle Busch started all the way back in the 21st position. The number 8 Richard Childress Racing Chevrolet certainly did not look like a frontrunner during the early portion of the event. To be precise, Busch completed the opening stage well outside of the top 20, making it appear as though he was on track to battle for yet another mediocre result in the midst of what has already transformed into an immensely aggravating season. However, that is exactly when the momentum began to shift. Throughout the course of the second stage, Busch along with the RCR crew finally managed to unlock some raw pace, executed vital adjustments on the race car, and began carving their way forward through the pack. He ultimately succeeded in crossing the line fifth in that stage, capturing some incredibly vital championship points in the process. Moving into the concluding stage, clever pit strategy and meticulous fuel management allowed him to maintain his track position inside the top 10, while several rival competitors began dropping back. When the checkered flag finally flew, Kyle Busch guided the number 8 Chevrolet across the line in the 8th spot, securing what officially stood as his premier performance of the whole NASCAR Cup Series schedule up to this point. And his most impressive outcome since locking down a top 5 performance at Phoenix the previous season. Learning about those details after knowing he fought through a severe illness all weekend genuinely makes that entire performance seem significantly more gritty. Following the conclusion of the event, Busch remarked, "A highly productive day for the number 8 Zone Jalapeno Lime Chevrolet organization. We maintained our spot as a top 10 vehicle throughout the bulk of the afternoon and brought it home 8th here at Watkins Glen International." He went on to state, "We executed the exact modifications and tactical decisions required to push ahead and reclaim lost track position after starting way back in 21st, all while managing a race car that consistently felt tight for the duration of the event. We completely ran out of gas right at the finish line, but we are still heading back with our second top 10 outcome of the current year." Yet this is the exact moment where the narrative transforms into something far more significant than a mere driver dealing with health issues over the course of a competitive weekend. Throughout the inner circles of the NASCAR garage, a heavy sentiment is developing that the friction between Kyle Busch and the Richard Childress Racing organization is hitting a genuinely perilous threshold from an emotional standpoint. Frankly, if you have spent time monitoring this competitive cycle with a close eye, you can essentially sense that vibe manifesting week after week at this point. Kyle Busch has experienced several highly charged, emotional outbursts over the team communications this year. We witnessed that irritation boil over completely at Martinsville. We observed the on-track altercation involving John Hunter Nemechek down at Texas. We have repeatedly overheard the sheer resentment broadcasted over the airwaves regarding car setups, overall velocity, pit lane tactics, and unforced errors. Now, in the wake of Watkins Glen, observers are beginning to link all of these individual pieces of the puzzle together. The reason for this is that during his peak championship seasons, while driving for Joe Gibbs Racing, Kyle Busch's highly volatile radio rants typically culminated in trips to victory lane. He possessed the unique ability to berate his crew for 3 straight hours and still find himself celebrating with the trophy at the end of the day. That was simply the definitive trademark of Rowdy. However, in the current landscape, those trips to victory lane are no longer materializing. When you take the trophies out of the equation, that persistent negativity begins to take on a completely different appearance. Furthermore, various garage rumors indicate that several individuals embedded within Richard Childress Racing are growing thoroughly drained by the unceasing psychological strain enveloping the number 8 operation. At the moment, no one is launching overt public criticisms against one another, but an undeniable weight is intensifying for both parties involved. This brings us to a topic that makes a lot of NASCAR enthusiasts highly uneasy to openly discuss. Kyle Busch is 41 years old now. He remains an incredibly gifted competitor. Absolutely no one disputes his capabilities. Yet, enthusiasts and garage insiders are beginning to question if the cumulative years of relentless pressure, compounding aggravation, and unending intensity are finally starting to take a toll on him both physically and psychologically. Kevin Harvick recently implied that Busch might not possess a wide array of viable opportunities outside of the Richard Childress racing camp moving into the future. A reality that truthfully injects a massive amount of additional strain into this dynamic, because it implies that this specific alliance practically has to succeed. That reality is precisely why the events at Watkins Glen felt so emotionally charged to observe. On one hand, you witnessed vivid glimpses of the vintage Kyle Busch of old. Astute race execution, masterful road course maneuvering, carving a path forward through the grid, enduring physical distress and illness, and dragging an 8th place result out of a 21st position starting spot. On the flip side, however, you also witnessed an aging driver who sounds utterly depleted. A competitor lugging a heavy burden of resentment into the garage week in and week out. A racer trying frantically to halt a downward slide before this competitive schedule completely evaporates from his grasp. Frankly, as followers of NASCAR, it feels incredibly bizarre witnessing Kyle Busch navigate this type of predicament, because for a vast stretch of his career, he represented the ultimate villain that the entire field dreaded facing. He stood as the exact competitor capable of dismantling everyone else's afternoon at a moment's notice. Nowadays, it seems like every single respectable performance simply dissolves into a massive debate regarding underlying pressure, internal friction, driver commitments, and cloudiness surrounding what lies ahead. Shifting focus to NASCAR enthusiasts reaching a boiling point following the checkered flag at Watkins Glen. Our secondary narrative today has absolutely erupted across social media platforms because the public simply cannot fathom why NASCAR officials never chose to deploy a caution flag for Cody Ware's massive impact during the closing stages of the event. This entire controversy kicked off with roughly 10 circuits left on the board when Cody Ware was trailing directly behind Ricky Stenhouse Jr. while coming out of the 7th turn. Out of nowhere, Ware dropped the handle on his machine and collided nose-first into the tire wall, protecting the infield in a genuinely violent collision. The truly terrifying element was not merely that initial contact. The force of the wreck sent Ware's vehicle spinning aggressively back out in the direction of the racing surface. Furthermore, fresh video clips that circulated across internet platforms after the fact seemed to indicate that the Armco guardrail positioned right behind those safety tires sustained structural damage due to the sheer velocity of the collision. Yet, in spite of all that, NASCAR leadership kept the green flag flying. Once the racing community caught wind of the onboard camera angles that Fox barely even acknowledged throughout the duration of the live stream, the virtual backlash instantly caught fire. Enthusiasts were sharing remarks along the lines of, "In what world did the yellow flag not wave?" That absolutely demanded a stoppage, but you are left stunned that a caution was never signaled. Truthfully, a massive segment of the audience was likewise incredibly angry with Fox for offering next to no coverage of the accident during the actual event window. The television feed merely provided a fleeting glimpse of Ware's crippled stock car resting off the racing line for a microsecond. There was virtually zero slow-motion playback, no comprehensive evaluation of the crash force, and no actual commentary provided. Consequently, once that interior perspective emerged on the web later on, followers immediately labeled it as yet another massive production failure from the Fox NASCAR broadcasting crew. Certain individuals even argued that the collision appeared significantly more severe than separate incidents occurring earlier in the afternoon that actually did warrant a yellow flag. Now, to provide proper context, Cody Ware did ultimately manage to nurse his wounded vehicle back down into the garage area while remaining under green flag conditions, and the sanctioning body likely concluded that the predicament was stable enough to permit the race to reach its natural conclusion. In addition, during the closing stages of the event, there were also on-track spins featuring Bubba Wallace and Josh Berry, that somehow managed to avoid a caution flag, simply due to the fact that both competitors kept their vehicles rolling forward. However, this is the exact area where enthusiasts lose their patience regarding the consistency of NASCAR leadership, because week in and week out, it appears the racing community is caught up in endless debates regarding the deployment of the yellow flag. One particular weekend, the sanctioning body will wave a caution flag that the audience views as completely uncalled for. Then the very next weekend, the fanbase is collectively yelling because a massive, high-velocity impact somehow results in the race staying green. Ultimately, Watkins Glen transformed into yet another glaring illustration of that profound gap between the decisions made by NASCAR officials and the overall expectations of the viewing audience. In the meantime, this entire whirlwind of chaos unfolded right alongside yet another mind-boggling road course exhibition courtesy of Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG absolutely schooled the field out there once more, capturing the checkered flag on behalf of the Trackhouse Racing organization following another brilliant driving performance at Watkins Glen. Frankly, observing his capabilities on these twisting layouts right now is comparable to watching a highly trained specialist completely dismantle some of the most elite racers across the globe inside their own sandbox. Following his triumph, Van Gisbergen stated, "An incredible feeling to find victory lane with the number 97 machine. Yeah, our super cheap car was spectacular. A huge thank you to everyone at Trackhouse. We struggled quite a bit during the practice session, but then our qualifying run was just phenomenal. We made some really great adjustments leading into today. Man, what a piece of machinery." He subsequently gave massive credit to his crew chief Stephen Doran for the tactical adjustments that permitted them to successfully hunt down the frontrunners late in the running, and honestly, that represents another massive talking point emerging from Watkins Glen. Shane Van Gisbergen is starting to look absolutely intimidating every single time the NASCAR schedule visits a road course venue. When you step back and look at it, this complete weekend just felt incredibly heavy with emotion from every conceivable perspective. You witnessed Kyle Busch fighting through a severe physical ailment while managing the non-stop psychological burden clouding his long-term tenure alongside Richard Childress Racing. You witnessed enthusiasts heavily scrutinizing the official calls made by NASCAR Race Control after Cody Ware's alarming collision failed to halt the action. You witnessed Fox Sports taking a massive beating across the internet for completely dropping the ball on crucial moments during the television coverage. You witnessed patience running thin and tempers flaring up all across the pit road once again. You can genuinely sense how incredibly high-strung this competitive cycle is turning into as the high-stakes environment continues to intensify later into the calendar. The reason is that at this stage of the game, every individual event carries significantly more weight. Every single misstep feels monumentally larger. Every single heated radio transmission instantly turns into a massive media headline. Every solitary choice regarding a caution flag triggers an internet debate that lingers for days on end. Truthfully, that is a core reason why following NASCAR is so incredibly compelling at the moment. The feelings are completely genuine. The stakes are undeniably massive, and following the events of Watkins Glen, it truly appears that every single individual involved in this industry is pushing things to the absolute limit. At this point, I really want to get your input on the situation. Do you believe that Kyle Busch and the Richard Childress Racing crew possess what it takes to salvage their partnership and reverse their fortunes? Did NASCAR Race Control make the correct judgment call by maintaining green flag conditions following Cody Ware's severe collision? Furthermore, do you think the fanbase is justified in their anger toward Fox Sports for providing next to no live coverage of that accident? Share your perspectives down below in the comments section, because I am fully aware that NASCAR enthusiasts are going to hold highly passionate viewpoints regarding all of these topics. Additionally, if you found value in this breakdown, please ensure you hit that like button and become a subscriber to NASCAR Nation Report. We remain a developing platform actively aiming to reach our milestone of 15,000 subscribers. If you appreciate transparent, day-to-day NASCAR dialogue coming straight from dedicated enthusiasts who follow this sport intensely every single week, we would be incredibly grateful to have you join our community right from the very start.